Special thanks to Displate for sponsoring this video. Welcome back to the Screen Crush Break Room. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in the Eternals. And now let's do our Screen Crush trivia question. If you want to know the answer, you can skip to this time code and find out. We all know that the great Jack Kirby created the Eternals, but for a brief time he worked exclusively for DC Comics, where he created the New Gods and Darkseid. So my question is, what DC comic did Jack Kirby insist he get to work on because it was their worst selling title? Well, you gotta admit, that was unlike any Marvel movie ever made. Let me know if you liked it, hated it, or have any questions down in the comments. Personally, I liked that it was weird. I like when things get weird.
Yes, he does.
The opening crawl, which was a first in the MCU, begins with the words, "in the beginning," just like the book of Genesis, setting this up to be a story about gods and creation. And boy, is it about creation. The opening crawl says that the Celestials began creating the universe before the singularities. And these singularities are actually the Infinity Stones. Remember, this is what the Collector called them when he showed a Celestial using the Power Stone.
Before creation itself, there were 6 singularities.
The lead Celestial is named Arishem, just like in the comics. So look, real quick, I just want to go over the differences between the comics and the movie, because I think it's interesting to look at what aspects of the original text Chloe Zhao chose to include. In the comics, the Celestials arrived on Earth 4 times, not to create life, but to tamper with the genetic line of the human race. They took early humans and split them off into 3 groups: Eternals, Deviants, and modern human beings. And the Deviants were intelligent. They had their own cities, and they ended up enslaving humanity. Each time the Celestials returned, it was to judge the progress of humankind to see if they were worthy to continue living on. But they also implanted a celestial gene in the human race that gave them the capacity to someday have superpowers. So when Peter Parker was bitten by a radioactive spider, it was his celestial gene being triggered, as opposed to a Zack Snyder fan being triggered.
You don't understand. Superman had to snap Zod's neck. People were gonna die.
And that is actually one of my favorite details in the movie.
Wait, are you seeing this?
What's that, Doug? Our assistant manager, Doug, everybody.
The posters keep changing.
Oh, good, you noticed the posters. Actually, these are Eternals exclusives made by Displate, the sponsor of this video. I love these posters. They're super durable, but they have an easy-to-use magnet mounting system. And they have posters officially licensed by Star Wars, Marvel, DC. In fact, there are more than 1.4 million designs, so it's kind of easy to get overwhelmed. So if you hit the link in the description, you'll see my profile where I've curated some of my favorite posters on the site. I have different collections for Marvel, Star Wars, Eternals, and many more.
Are you doing this? Are you a wizard like Harry Belafonte?
Yes, Doug, they also have posters of dogs. Each displate is printed on demand, has a fast delivery, and is signed by a master of production. Plus, every time you buy one of these metal posters, Displate plants a tree. So buying a Displate is good for the environment and for your home.
It's like I blink and stuff just changes.
We're offering Screen Crush fans a special discount. If you click the link in the description, you get your first 1 to 2 displates for 26% off. But if you buy 3 or more, you get a 36% discount.
Man, that was weird. I need to stop eating CBD treats.
Back to the Easter eggs. Spoiler alert, the Celestials actually create all life in the universe. They even predate the Infinity Stones. Now the opening crawl, which felt very much like an 80s sci-fi movie to me, also established the lie that the Eternals are from Olympia. Now in the comics, they actually lived in a mountain city called Olympia that gave birth to the Greek myth about Mount Olympus. In the movie, Ajak is the Prime Eternal because she can speak to the Celestials, which is also Ajak's gift in the comics. But in the comics, being Prime Eternal was always something of a power struggle. First, it was Zuras who was the basis for Zeus, then it passed to his daughter Thena, and then to Ikarus. In fact, Druig is something of a villain in the comics because he's always trying to become the Prime Eternal and control the Unimind. So the opening shot of the Domo in front of the sun seems like it's meant to echo the monolith in 2001: A Space Odyssey. In that movie, aliens send a black monolith to Earth at key points in humanity's history to spur forward our evolution. And there's also a lot of foreshadowing in the beginning. Ikarus looks down on Earth and they are seen first arriving from the sun, just as the movie ends with him looking down on Earth again and then flying into the sun. So the Eternals arrive on Earth and find a real Mesopotamia as the Deviants are attacking the humans. Now this area, nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, was always called the Cradle of Civilization. Civilization. I liked how this opening action scene used new technology that we have not even seen a hint of in the MCU before. A lot of what we've seen in the MCU is either nanotech or force field based. But because the Eternals were created by such an ancient race, all of their tech is totally different. It's all these circles and geometric figures that can be condensed into pure cosmic energy. In this opening fight, Ikarus fights a winged deviant just like this one in the comics. The scene ends with Pink Floyd's Time, which is a perfect choice. The song is about aging. At the beginning of the song, time seems endless, just like it does when we're kids, and much like how the Eternals arrive on Earth and only see possibility. Then, as the song goes on, the narrator feels time running out, as plans go unfulfilled and death creeps closer. In the same way, the Eternals are working against a secret clock, the countdown to the emergence. Then we flash to modern-day London shortly after the blip, and we know it's shortly after because one of the news tickers in the square says, "Welcome back, we can help." Now, other stories like Spider-Man Far From Home and Falcon the Winter Soldier have talked about the logistical problems surrounding the blip, people returning homeless and refugee populations being displaced. We also see the stone dagger that Sersei transformed into gold. Now, this moment symbolizes when the human race moved beyond simply surviving and began building towards civilization. Gold has little practical purpose, but its rarity gives it imaginary value, which more advanced civilizations use for trade. So when Sersei runs into her job at the Natural History Museum, she greets a statue of Charles Darwin, author of the Theory of Evolution. You could see this as a dig at Darwin since the movie seems to enforce intelligent design, but it also foreshadows the way that the space gods use deviants as apex predators to ensure humanity's survival of the fittest. And Cersei's lecture is on apex predators, foreshadowing not only the deviants, but how the Celestials are at the top of the food chain. We meet her boyfriend Dane Whitman. In the comics, he is an Avenger called the Black Knight. He has a long and confusing origin that is totally bonkers, and it's alluded to in this movie. We're going to cover most of that in an Ending Explained video, but we're going to go over a little bit of it later in the video. When the earthquake hits, Sersei transforms a fossilized mollusk to save one of the kids. Now this seems like a random choice, but these are actually some of the oldest creatures on Earth, another nod to Earth's evolutionary history. So it turns out that this is a global earthquake that most people assume is related to the blip. And we saw this same attitude pervade everybody in Far From Home, when everyone just assumes Beck is telling the truth about the multiverse, because it's the least weird thing that they've seen in years.
And nowadays, they'll believe anything.
Like, if you told people on this Earth that their planet was created to house a space baby, they would have been like, get out of my way, I'm on my way to work, who cares, space baby's fine. Then they go out to celebrate Dane's birthday, and Sersei gives him a ring with his family crest on it that dates back to medieval times. This is a nod toward his family history, as many of his ancestors have used the ebony blade that we see in the credits, and they've taken on the title of the Black Knight.
Come back here and take what's coming to you! I'll bite your legs off!
He also mentions his family problems may be related to his uncle, who was a villain called the Black Knight in the comics, but a bit more on that in our Ending Explained video. When the boy in the bar touches Sprite, we see her illusion fade for a moment. Now, this is taken directly from the recent Neil Gaiman run of the Eternals, when Sprite casts an illusion to make the Eternals think that they're normal people, so he can become famous and finally grow up. Dane asks, completely serious, if she's a wizard like Doctor Strange, another example of how people with superpowers are basically just accepted in this universe. Then he asks her,
why didn't you guys help fight Thanos?
And he's basically an audience proxy because we're all wondering the same thing. So she answers,
we were instructed not to interfere in any human conflicts unless deviants are involved.
But it's interesting that Thanos is the reason why Ajak changed her mind about letting humanity die. She saw humans reverse the snap on a universal scale, so she decides that they have too much potential for good to just be snuffed out. So the deviant attacks and Ikarus shows up to fight it off. There was a cute little moment here where he and Dane shared the screen together. Now, of course, both these actors were in Game of Thrones, and in their very last scene together, Jon Snow is about to go join the Night's Watch, and Robb says,
next time I see you, you'll be all in black.
And then he was, and will later become the Black Knight.
It was always my color.
So the deviants returning makes the Eternals pull a Jake and Elwood blues.
We're putting the band back together.
This is also following the structure of that 2006 Neil Gaiman series, where as the Eternals regain their memories, they go find one another one at a time. Then we get another flashback to Mesopotamia, this time at the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the wonders of the ancient world. And this is a perfect replica of Babylon's Ishtar Gate, which is now in a museum in Berlin. Gilgamesh is a very important character in the history of myth. He was a central character of Mesopotamian mythology, one of the first written tales. And his story is the great-great-great-great-great-grandfather of all the superhero stories that we know today. Later, Sprite tells the Epic of Gilgamesh when he meets his friend Enkidu. This story is so prevalent that Captain Picard will tell it to a Temerian hundreds of years in the future.
Gilgamesh struck him with his sword.
Gilgamesh.
Now this is actually Picard communicating with people who only speak in metaphor and references, basically how we always talk here in the video store.
Captain America, Thor's hammer.
Han Solo death.
So, just like in the comics, Phastos builds stuff. He's all excited to give people the steam engine, but settles for a plow. Actually, a revolutionary device that helped move ancient Sumerians out of the Neolithic era and into the Bronze Age. So thanks, Phastos. Thanks for the plow. So, big twist when Ajak turned up dead, but it worked very well within the movie. The Eternals needed to lose their safety net, and a murder mystery always brings together a superpowered family. Just ask the Umbrella Academy. The movie pivots at Tenochtitlan at 1521, when Cortez slaughtered the Aztecs and sacked their capital city. This is when the Eternals split up, and actually one of the earliest instances of modern genocide. This is when the era of colonialism kicked into high gear, basically when planet Earth fractured into two sides, the conquered and the conquerors. So it's fitting that this is when the Eternals split up. This is also the era that began the dawn of the Age of Enlightenment, when people stopped believing in gods and superstition. So the Eternals wouldn't have been as revered as they were in Mesopotamia. Now this is also when the warlike Thena loses her mind and attacks the others, a symbol of the colonial slaughter. Thena's mind is fracturing because she's remembering her past life as an Eternal on a planet called Century 6, which sounds like a store that sells sixes, but like 6 from Blossom. And holy crap, that's a real doll. So when Thena remembers this past life, she turns on the Eternals to stop them from helping the Celestials with the emergence. Thena also split with the others in the comics, but that was because she fell in love with the deviant leader Crow, played by Peter Sarsgaard in this movie. In fact, their embrace in the cave later on seems like a nod to the romance in the comics. Thena and the others losing their memories is also taken from the Neil Gaiman and John Romita Jr. books, where most of the Eternals have to slowly regain their memories to stop the dreaming Celestial Tiamat, who is also in this movie. And Thena's actual condition, the Mad Weary, is taken from the comics, but in the comics, it's Sersei who suffers from it. So when Druig mind controls people, their eyes glow, just like in the comics. Like I said earlier, he's a bit of a villain in the book, so it makes sense that he would be the first to leave the others and go do his own thing. Then, in modern day, we meet Kumail Nanjiani's Kingo, my favorite character in the movie, who for some reason pieces out during the climax. He's on the set of his Bollywood movie wearing a costume modeled after his Eternals battlesuit. The movie is about the legend of Ikarus, the child who flew too close to the sun and melted the wax on his artificial wings. Now, in the movie, Sersei says that Sprite made this story up, but in the comics, Ikarus actually did have a human son whose wings malfunctioned because Ikarus neglected him. Kingo is a big Captain America fan. We can see the shields in the background are modeled after Cap's, and in his private jet, we see that he owns the original Steve Rogers shield. And I'm gonna say it's the original, even though we saw it in the Smithsonian and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because Falcon and the Winter Soldier has also established that everything in a museum we see is fake and rich people keep all the real art for themselves. He says that BTS are going to do a cameo and they're some kind of cake, maybe? I'm not really sure.
They're a musical group and they sing and dance and I love them.
All right, thank you, Doug. Thanks for that. He also says that his movie is the first of a trilogy, and this seemed like it was Marvel poking fun at themselves for planning multiple movies ahead of time. Karun Patel is his valet and one of the best characters in the film. You have to have these human beings around to balance out all the weird stuff that's happening around the powered people. That's why Hawkeye is the most important Avenger. So Kingo has been pretending to be generations of actors instead of just one guy, poking fun at the long lines of Bollywood dynasty actors like the Kapoors. Now, this idea of him being a celebrity is also taken from that Gaiman run of comics, when Sprite has become a TV and pop star. They meet up with Gilgamesh and Thena in Australia, where he's been fermenting beer with his spit and listening to Merle Haggard's Mama Tried, a song about a ruffian who turned out bad despite his mom's best efforts. The parallel here is with the Eternals, who rebelled against their heavenly parents, the Celestials. Now, Gilgamesh compares Karun and Kingo to Alfred and Batman. And of course, later on, Jack compares Ikarus to Superman.
Dad, I saw him on TV with the cape shooting laser beams.
I don't wear a cape.
But this isn't just a fun throwaway line. In the real world, characters like Superman and Batman are modern interpretations of thousand-year-old archetypes like Gilgamesh, Athena, and Ikarus. So, by referencing characters who are fictional in this world, the MCU, like Batman, it's showing how regular people in the Marvel Cinematic Universe are still talking about these reincarnations of ancient mythologies, just like we do in the real world. This is showing the effect of the Eternals on modern fiction. So, even in a world where superheroes are commonplace, people still celebrate these fictional myths. Kingo mentions that he knew Thor when he was a kid, something I would love to see in a flashback. Sprite name drops.
So now that Captain Rogers and Iron Man are both gone, Who do you think's gonna lead the Avengers?
Now, it's interesting that she says Captain Rogers, the name that he would have had in World War II. Makes me wonder, did they actually meet at some point during the war? So then, Sersei learns the incredibly bonkers, potentially controversial truth that the Earth is actually an egg for a celestial baby, and that to save the world, they have to perform an abortion. This is taken from the comics, but like an alternate universe called Earth X, where it's revealed that the celestial tampering is to turn human beings into antibodies to protect the egg. And Galactus, the planet-eating giant, is actually nature's check on the celestial reproduction. He only eats planets that are filled with celestial babies. So weird, man. I thought a talking raccoon asking a cyborg Nazi killer for his arm was weird, but this is way past that. The idea of a space baby is also a nod to 2001, where humanity's next stage of evolution is a space baby. And there we learned that the deviants were made by celestials, just like in the comics, and that sentient beings essentially feed the egg at the middle of the planet. Now, this has so many implications that we're going to have to explore in other videos. Is this ego's real origin? Was Thanos' real plan to stop the emergence? Be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so we get all those answers in the next few days. We also learned that the Eternals are robots from space, which, hey, you know what? Sam warned us about that.
Androids, aliens, and wizards.
And the Eternals were all three. So the celestial buried in the earth is called Tiamat, and their plan is to put him to sleep. In the comics, Tiamat was a celestial who rebelled against the others, and as punishment, they put him to sleep under the earth. So he is called the Dreaming Celestial. The movie Tiamat is even golden black, just like he is in the comics. So they go to the Amazon to recruit Druig when the deviants attack. Sersei turns a building into metal to protect the people inside. But what metal could possibly stop a deviant? This might be the first appearance of adamantium in the MCU. During the fight, Kingo says "Dashoom," and this is a sound effect type noise from old Bollywood, kind of like pow or bam. After absorbing Gilgamesh, Crow blames the Eternals for murdering its species, saying they are just trying to survive. Ironically, this is exactly what the Celestials are trying to do. And the Celestials, in a way, are colonizers, just like Cortez's forces. They spread their own kind by destroying others who they perceive being weaker or unworthy of existence. And the visual of the deviant absorbing the Eternals' power is taken straight from the Jack Kirby comics. Phastos has taken a step away from the life after Hiroshima, which he blames himself for because he invented the plow. In the comics, he also refuses to help Ikarus against a re-emergent deviant threat. So on the fly, he invents a name for Ikarus, Isaac. In the comics, Isaac was actually the name of the supercomputer that controlled Titan. And Titan, in the comics, is actually a colony of Eternals that live on Saturn's moon, which I'm now thinking could be the case in the MCU as well, but we'll cover that in another video. And he calls Sersei Sylvie, maybe a nod to Sylvie from Loki, but probably not. In a bit of corporate synergy, we see that Phastos' son Jack is a Star Wars fan and has Star Wars drawings on his wall in an Empire Strikes Back coloring book. Ikarus name checks vibranium.
What's this even made of? Vibranium?
And actually, in the Earth X comics, that celestial egg was made from vibranium, which is why it was so prevalent on Earth. And the clay figure on the table is a nod to another Jack Kirby character, This Is Your Mom. Phastos plays the song Into the World by Brenda Lee. A little on the nose, but I'll allow it. They return to Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, where Makari has been living in the domo and stealing stuff.
You f***ing stole it, man.
Now, she's wearing a shirt of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, but it's written in French. Now, of course, in that novel, Martians invade, but they just can't handle Earth's germs. Just like in this movie. A massive, unstoppable space god is threatening the Earth, but these tiny beings are able to infect it and kill it off. Thena is holding a sword, and then Sprite says, is that the Ebony Blade or Excalibur? And the Ebony Blade is the sword of death that Dane is looking at in the post-credit scene. So in the comics, Arthurian lore was real. In fact, Dane Whitman's ancestor wielded Excalibur and the Ebony Blade at the same time, before giving Excalibur to the Lady of the Lake. Then he mind-jumped into Dane's body to defeat some aliens. It's a long story. Now, the Ebony Blade was actually forged by Merlin from a meteorite. And again, we're going to go over that in our Indian Explained video. But I think it's really cool that the MCU's basically acknowledged that Camelot and Arthur are real.
And I am your king. I didn't know we had a king. I thought we were an autonomous collective.
Phastos works out how to form a Unimind, which is also from the comics. It's basically when the Eternals Captain Planet themselves into a big brain and can challenge a Celestial. Now there's one more flashback to Ajak talking to Ikarus about the emergence and telling him that they have 7 days. Back to that Genesis biblical opening, God made the world in 7 days, and there's actually 7 different time periods in this movie. And as it turns out, the giant godlike being does end up resting on the 7th day. Then Ikarus tells her that he always thought of the Celestials as the ocean. They give life, but they also take it away. And actually, human beings and all life on Earth did evolve from the ocean. When Makkari is looking for the emergence, she runs past the aqueduct in Italy and the statue of Christ the Redeemer in Rome, a neat way of showing one of humanity's greatest works and their devotion to a higher power. Ikarus does a heel turn because he is 100% Team Celestial, just as he's 100% devoted to the rules of the Eternals in the comics. And Sprite turns with him, just as she was the villain in the 2006 game and series. And side note, I loved how the Eternals costumes matched the original Jack Kirby designs and colors, even incorporating some of the geometric loops and shapes from his work. The Unimind attempts to join together the Eternals' cosmic energy, which I'm wondering if that's MCU speak for the power cosmic from the comics. Just like the Silver Surfer rebelled against Galactus using the cosmic energy he gave him, the Eternals use the Celestials' own cosmic energy against them. After Sersei turns the Celestial into marble, Ikarus commits suicide by sun. Typical Ikari. Then some Eternals go to space to find more of their own kind, more on that in our post-credits video. Dane and Sersei are teasing his appearance in another movie with him saying that his family drama is weird when Ereshkigal comes to Earth and takes the Eternals off-world. He says that he's going to scan their memories and judge whether humanity is worthy to survive. This is just like in the comics, when Ereshkigal originally came to Earth to judge if humanity was worthy of survival. And now the answer to our Screen Crush trivia question. Which DC comic did Jack Kirby insist he work on because it was the lowest selling? Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen. Now, oh my god.
Ryan.
Yes?
Ryan, the time has come.
Is that you, Ereshkigal, the celestial leader of the fifth host, come here to judge humanity?
No, this is Gary, your boss. I own the store.
Oh. You know, I didn't even know I had a boss. I just always kind of thought I'd always been here.
It is time for you to get back to work. Your break is over.
Alright, cool beans. And we're back. Well, that's all the Easter eggs that we found, but if you found any, let us know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.